like they want to say, hey, if you want to be on the first line, or if you want to be on a top line, you have to earn it. And it's like he's stuck. And like you said, he makes one mistake, boom, back to the bench. And
Right. You have to earn it with fourth line minutes playing with fourth line, you know, line mates. And I don't know how that works either, from the generating standpoint, because you're playing with line mates who are having a hard time getting it going too. So that to me is just kind of the situation he's in is I don't know that he's in a situation where he's going to jumpstart anybody, and the people he's playing with aren't really going to jumpstart him.
right,
So yeah,
right.
yeah, I just feel like he's kind of in a situation at this point where yeah, when guys like Brian Rust and Riley Sheehan, these are guys who aren't really going themselves, and yeah, you're not getting a lot of opportunity in that bottom six to jump out and show what you can do from an offensive standpoint. If that's what they're looking for him to do, I feel like the deck's kind of stacked against him at this point.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. When you come out of college and you try to get a job, and they say we need experience. Well, how are you going to get experience if you don't get a job?
Exactly. You should have done an internship.
Yes.
That, but
Well,
that's a
that's
whole other.
speaking of internship. This is if he had an extra year in the minors, it would have helped a lot. But his first year got burned. What he played like like barely over the minimum to stay, and then he got sent to junior, and it just that extra year of being in the AHL might have helped him a lot.
You're exactly right. Now he's in that situation where he can't get sent down. So the development time is shot.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of Rust, he's not doing so great either. Do you see him possibly being traded? I mean, he's making pretty good money, and there's not much production.
Yeah, he's a player who I think Jim Rutherford was definitely talking about when he was making those inquiries to other teams. And he's a guy, when you were talking about him going on the radio and kind of making those public call outs about
Hmm.
players, he's a guy who I think he was directly referring to when he talked about players who got good contracts recently and now suddenly are producing. Like the other night, in their last home game, Brian Russ had a point blank chance that he's skating in, and I'm like, what is he doing? He makes no move. He just shoots it right into the goalie. Like, this is not Brian Russ. This is not the Brian Russ we're used to seeing. And usually there's so much more speed and cleverness with the way that he plays, and it's just not happening for him this year. And I feel like he's the kind of player that if he'd have a couple go in, perhaps everything changes and it breaks through. But he really needs to just get it started. But I don't know that he's going to produce at quite the level that that contract promises. Um, I don't know. I feel like that's kind of the classic example of paying on past production, hoping the future production matches it, and perhaps you're going to be a little disappointed. So he's a player I think the Penguins would definitely be willing to talk about if a team was interested. But again, he's making a good bit of money. I don't know if you'll necessarily get a team to want to take on the contract at the production that he's probably going to be generating.
Right, right. Yeah, you gotta love Rutherford. He just does not. You know exactly what he's thinking. The guy does not. He does not mince words.
Oh yeah, he was like, oh, some guys who, we gave contracts to, they're not producing. Then there are guys like he might as well have said like Hagelin and Shan who are
Right.
in contract years and they're changing their games and they're not doing it for us either. Like, my gosh, you might as well just start saying the names outright.
I wonder if you have to see those people in the hall, the next day or whatever, or had at the coffee maker or something. It's like, oh hey, how you doing? Oh, we're good.
And the beauty of Jim Rutherford is I pretty much don't think he cares.
No, he does not.
I'm sure he sees them at the coffee maker and is just like, hey Carl, hey Riley, how you doing today?
Hey, Hey, how's that lack of production doing? Hopefully you can pour coffee a little bit better than you score goals.
I would have
Yeah.
no doubt whatsoever. He's kind of a dream to get the chance to cover just because you never have to wonder what's going on in his mind.
Yeah, and he's not going to be somebody that just throws like cliches or whatever. You're not going to hear we're going to play in one game at a time or whatever. He's going to give you a good quote.
Yeah, the directness is sometimes kind of disarming. Like in the beginning of dealing with him, you wonder, okay, what's the subtext here? What he's saying this and it's so direct. Is there something going on here that he's not saying, am I, is this just too obvious? And then you realize, wow, that's actually what he actually says is exactly what he means. Like,
Yeah.
coming from Ray Shero before him, who was kind of a master at that sort of cloak and dagger GM approach. That was, the more of the classic
Right.
NHL GM approach.
Yeah.
Like Ray
Yeah.
Shero is very much the guy who you expect, yeah, lower body injury, just with that very vague term. And Jim Rutherford, here's what it is. Here's what's on my mind.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, pretty crazy.
It's amazing. Another player that the internet loves to talk about is Jack Johnson. Is he doing any better? Is he fitting in, or is he the disaster that some people say?
Yeah, I feel bad for Jack Johnson. You know what? He with the contract he got this summer, he can't win. He just can't win. Like everybody who was determined to hate him because he got that big deal was going to hate him regardless of how he played this year. That's my opinion. And he's made some pretty glaring mistakes. Jack Johnson is not the fastest defenseman. He's not the most offensive minded defenseman. He's typically been a pretty bad plus minus player throughout his career. These things combine for him being on the ice for some pretty glaring mistakes this year. And every time someone takes note of those, he's gonna be, sort of strung up for the fact that they're paying him what they are, and they made a choice to add him to the team when they could have potentially upgraded their defense in other ways. So I think Jack Johnson is not doing as terrible of a job as people are making him out to do, I think. I also don't think, you know, to be fair, that the primary defensive unit on the Penguins that I trust is Chris Letang and Brian Dumoulin.
Yeah.
After that, I feel like it gets really sketchy this year, and in various, at various times, I think different players on the defense have struggled, with the exception really of Chris Letang, who's been phenomenal this year. Even Brian Dumoulin had a bad stretch this year. But Chris Letang was paired with Jack Johnson for a while, and that was not the best pairing for Chris.
No. Oh God.
And suddenly he's back with Brian Dumoulin, and Chris Letang looks great again.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of, not the best look for Jack Johnson. So it kind of says something there. Um, there are times I think he does some things well. I think he's been really good on the penalty kill, in spots, not consistently, but in spots. There have been nights that he's had some monster penalty kills for them. There have been times, I think he's done some really good work along the boards for them. I think he's a really physical player. He's a more physical player than I thought he was, coming to Pittsburgh. He's a pretty big guy, and I don't think I ever had the impression of him being one of those big guys who really used his size a lot. But he really is, and he's consistently kind of a hits leader. What I also sometimes notice is I feel like he might be using the physicality and detracting from the coverage, the assignment that he's supposed to be, on instead.
So
So
he goes for the big hit.
exactly.
Yeah. Darius
Yeah.
Kasparaitis disease.
Yeah, absolutely true. So yeah, I think there's, and at this point in his career, I don't know that there's any overcoming some of the defensive shortcomings that there clearly are there. I think I think if you're, I know like plus minus as a stat that a lot of people hate at this point, but I think if you're consistently that much of a minus player throughout your career, it's hard to not look at it. Um, so at this point in your career, I don't know if you expect that to, expect that kind of defensive work consistently to change. But, I think he's been competent. I think he's been on the ice for a fair number of glaring errors, but I also think a lot of that has come during the time the team as a whole has really struggled. So I
Yeah.
don't know if it's fair to judge him specifically. So, let's see how he plays when the team as a whole is getting it together. And, perhaps we can judge him a little differently. I'm willing to give him a shot and give him some time to fit in with the system.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't know if it's. I've seen so many times when a defenseman comes to the team, it takes them a while, sometimes even a year to adjust for some reason. I don't know if this happens with every team or what, but I just remember I remember Paul Martin. He was
Oh,
terrible his first year. I think
yes.
Gonchar was terrible. Like I don't know why. It takes them a while to get used to playing with a new team.
Well, and the Penguins are a team that asks us, they have a certain ask of their defensemen, which is to jump into the play and try
Yeah.
to contribute to the offense. And so for a guy like Paul Martin, who, wasn't really used to playing that style of defense, where's he coming from? The New Jersey Devils. I think, that's sort of a change for a player like that. And for Jack Johnson, you're asking him to shift from a John Tortorella coach team to a style like this. So I think it is a big ask of him. And uh, for, for that type of change, I really think you have to be more patient with a player like that. And you can never expect him to be a Chris Letang type of player or even a Juuso Riikola type of player who I think has fit in a lot better with that style of play with the Penguins. But I think, he's a guy who has obviously been trying to embrace what the Penguins are asking him to do and has obviously been caught a number of times, not necessarily doing it as well as he would like and been on the ice for some big mistakes. But I think I think for a guy like that, it's really going to take some time. So, patience might just be the key for him. And I think when you come in with the expectations of such a big contract, maybe there's not a lot of patience that fans are willing to give you.
Yeah, I've never seen a player on maybe any Pittsburgh sports team that when they acquired him, people got so angry. Like,
They were
what?
angry like a week before when they got the rumor was out there. They were like,
Yeah, yeah. Like, God, geez, poor guy. And you know he had to hear these things. You know he had to see people were throwing all this hate. Like, guy, and
oh,
then he tried to endear himself. What did he say about Columbus? Like, oh, now I'm with a good organization or something like that, and pissed off Tortorella.
oh, that was hilarious. That was absolutely hilarious. He just yeah, he clearly was so excited to come to the Penguins organization, and I think he's a guy too that really he's had a lot personally that he's gone through over the last number of years. I think this is actually the first year he's keeping his paycheck,
Oh,
after this
that's
disaster.
terrible.
I
Yeah.
know. And I imagine that, and it's a guy who I think really maybe deserves sort of the fresh start. And you want to kind of embrace that and give him the opportunity. And I love this little video the Penguins did when he first came with his family kind of moving in. And it was a clear attempt to,
Please like
uh,
him.
yeah, yeah, please, he's a nice guy, and he really does seem like a very nice guy from interacting with him. So, um, I think really just an attempt to hope that fans would embrace him and seems like a guy that really does deserve sort of that fresh start. So, with any luck, the team gets it turned around and he gets it turned around too, because it is rough. And And when you see him on the ice for a really bad mistake, you just cringe because you know what's coming, and you're thinking
Yeah.
it too, because